Okay, in this video, we are going to, let me share my screen real quick. We're going to describe different data attributes and data types and explain how to use a relational database. In particular, we're going to use the function VLOOKUP in Microsoft Excel. So real quickly, let's lay a little bit of foundation with data attributes and types real quick. So most large organizations are going to store their information in databases. Um, and this information is going to track and store characteristics of the entity, including things like details about customers, sales transaction, vendors, employees, and suppliers. The characteristics that it stores, we refer to as attributes or fields. And they can be composed of a lot of different identifiers. The possible set of values that each attribute can possess is referred to as its data type. So some examples of that include string or text or short text or alphanumeric, which would be a collection of one or more characters that can be letters or numbers or combination. Typically, they may be a unique identifier, but they may not have meaning. Um, there are numbers that can be stored. There are dates, which are typically in a certain specific format. There's also geographic information, which usually has longitude or latitude information in it. So these are all the different types of data types that can exist, describing attributes or fields. With relational databases, we typically store information in separate tables and then facilitate access to the database or data set by relating each table to one another. Um, the databases are composed of tables, fields, and records. A table is data that's organized into columns and rows. We refer to the information in the columns as fields, and fields represent the attributes of the data. Typically, they contain descriptive information about the observations in the table. And the rows are referred to as records. And the records within each observation contain unique instances of what's being described in the table. Within each table, we have a primary key, which is a unique identifier for the record. And within each table, we have to have a primary key, but we can have a foreign key, which is a column or group of columns that exists to create relationships between two tables. And so what we're going to do is use this information to actually go through a mini lab here in a minute. But as an example, as sort of a visual representation, here you can see two tables with information. We have customer table on the right and transaction table on the left. You can see that the customer ID here for the customer's table is the primary key. It's the unique identifier. Every single customer has its own customer ID that isn't repetitive. Every single one is different. And then on the transaction table, we have a foreign key, meaning the customer ID is a way for us to relate to the customer's table. Notice that the customer ID is repetitive here. Here we can have transactions with the same customer. So you can get the customer ID multiple times. Over on the customer's table, it's a primary key. It only happens once. For the transaction table, the primary key would be transaction ID. Every single ID is unique and different, but the customer ID serves as a foreign key to relate the two tables so that we can pull data from one table into the other. And that's exactly what we're going to do in this mini lab. So the mini lab is going to have us get experience using VLOOKUP. And so in order to do this, I'm going to refer back to, I'll refer to these slides just a little bit, mainly getting at this total sort of question. The question that we're asking this lab, still using the AMPS model, right? Ask the question as first step, is what are the total sales for the Mavic 2 drone? So we're going to refer back to that here in a minute. But what I want to do is kind of go to a few of these steps and context information given to you in your text about this particular mini lab. Remember, your text does a great job of walking you through step by step of here's what they want you to do in the mini lab. And so we're going to follow a few of those steps. To start us off, we want some context into the data files that we're looking at. So we're looking at the company DJI. I've kind of highlighted some of this information here. It's a company that produces and sells drones. And we have a table that has fictitious sales for the month of October. And then we have a second table about the products that the DJI company sells. And that second table has information about product description, sales price, and the cost of each product. And so we're going to use product SKU as our key to link both of these two tables together. So what it wants us to do for the mastering the data piece is we've got to access two files because we're going to link them together. The first one is the mini lab to sales journal data. And the second one is going to be the mini lab to SKU data. And they give you information on each one of these description, data dictionary for each one of the fields or attributes, the columns that you're going to see there for both of the files. So you can look those over if you'd like. But I've downloaded each one of these. So you'll click on those links to get each one of these. Or if the links don't take you directly there, remember that I've posted for you the student-wide information. You can access it if you go to your textbook here and click on the textbook and then go down to, I've posted this on Brightspace, but if you scroll down in the table of contents to additional student resources here, you'll get the student-wide information. If you click on that, download it, and then you can find these files that you're looking at, for instance, Minilab 2 SKU data. But I've also posted that on Brightspace. So if you'd like to look at it under Brightspace, I believe it's under additional class resources under Brightspace. You should be able to find it there too. So I've downloaded these data sets here. So I've got this one, which is our sales journal, and this one, which is our SKU data. And so what I'm going to do, as always, this is my process here, is I'm going to create a copy just in case I ever need to refer back to the original. Move this in. I'll call this modified version 1 here. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. Create a copy. I'm just right-clicking on that, by the way, on the tab, and then renaming it by double-clicking in modified version. Okay, so now what I want to do is look to see what it wants us to do. If we go back to our PowerPoint, the overall goal is what are the total sales of the Mavic 2 drone. Well, if we look in this first file that we have invoice number, customer number, a SKU, and a date. And even though this is a sales journal data, we don't actually have the sales price. If it wants to know total sales, we're going to have to pull that over. So if we look at this file, we have sales price, we have a description, we have a SKU, and we have cost, but we don't have the actual transactions. So here we have transactions on this file, the sales journal data. Here we have the sales price. And so what we want to do is combine these together. So in order to do that, I'm going to create a few extra columns. Let's see what all they wanted us to create. I think they wanted 3 columns for us to do. So we'll just do all 3. It'll give us a little bit more practice. We don't necessarily need all 3, but they ask us to do the description. They ask us for the product. They ask us to do the sales price for the product, and they ask us to do the cost. So let's do this. I'm going to type in, this is in my sales journal. This is going to have the foreign key, and this is going to have our primary key here. So we're going to type in description. Then it wanted us to do sales price, so we'll do sales price. And then it wanted cost. So cost. All these reformat, just by double clicking there, you'll reformat the columns or the fields here to show how wide it needs to be to incorporate whatever the value is in the cell. Okay, now I need to pull the description from here. We've got the description right here. I need to pull it from here into this file. So I'm going to use a VLOOKUP for that. I'm going to type equal, and this is the formula that they wanted you to practice on. So we use VLOOKUP. And once it's highlighted, you can just tab it. Okay, so what we're going to do first is choose our lookup value. Our foreign key here is going to be the skew. So I'm going to just type over to where it says D2. And since I'm going to pull this down, I'm going to put a dollar sign in front of D. That will hold the column constant. And if I don't put it in front of the two, then the row will change because the two is the row here. So I'll put the dollar sign in front of the D here to hold the column constant as I drag the formula down. And I'll leave the two open so that the row will change as I drag it down because it'll grab the skew right next to it each time, but it'll stay in the same column, which is D. Okay, once I've got that lookup value input, then I'm going to put a comma there to go on to the next argument within the formula. And so here they want the table array. So the table array is where we're actually looking up the information. So I'm going to go into this, it's called Minilab 2 skew data table. And I'm going to click on the second row here. I'm going to highlight this whole table except for the attribute names here. So I'm going to go down from A2 down to D25. Highlight all of that and notice it's already put dollar signs in front of this entire table. And that's good because that's where we want to pull from every single time. This will be the table that we're pulling data from, and it'll be this array that we look at every single time we're doing this formula. So I'm going to leave that and put comma here. That'll send me to my next argument. My next argument is the column index number. So here I'm going to want to grab the description. So if we look at this, we've got column 1, 2, 3, 4. And so I want to pull column 2, which is going to be the description here. And so essentially what it's saying is when you find this skew, this unique identifier, this primary key, when you find that, pull the information from column 2 here over into the table where I've typed this VLOOKUP formula. So that's what this is doing. And then I'm going to put one last thing. Excel wants me to decide if I want a true or false argument here. True would be an approximate match, meaning that it gets as close as possible to that unique identifier. False will be an exact match. And I want false here because I want you to only pull the information when the skews match exactly. And so once I've typed that, I'll end the parentheses and push enter. And that pulls over my information here. So now I've got my description pulling from this table over here to match this skew. So it finds this skew here, and then it pulls the description here. And so I'm going to take this and go to where that small square is here and just double click, and it will drag this formula down. And because, remember, I left my D with the the dollar sign here to hold it constant, and then left it open here, it will automatically change with whatever the skew is for that particular row. So I double click to resize that. And now I'm going to go to my next VLOOKUP, which is sales price. So I'm going to do the same thing. They have you do it 3 times because I think they want you to have some practice here. So I'm going to go to my skew, which is going to be my foreign key here. I'm going to put a comma here, and I'm going to type back in real quickly and put the dollar sign to hold that column constant. Now I'm going to go over to my table array, and I'm going to highlight that entire table array. I'm going to leave the dollar signs in there. Then I'm going to go to column index here. Now I want column 3. So I'm going to type 3 here, and then I'm going to type false because I want an exact match again, and push in parentheses and enter or return. I'm going to change this to dollar sign and double click so that this auto fills. I'm just pushing command down or control down if you're on a PC, command down if you're on a Mac, to make sure everything's been populated all the way down. That'll take you to the last value in a cell where there's not a break. Now I'll push command up or control up again, and that'll take me back to the top here or the next area where there's a break. Okay, now I'm going to go into the cost, and I'm going to do the same thing, VLOOKUP. Okay, tab over, and I want, again, D2, but I want the dollar sign here to hold the column constant. I'm going to push comma, go into my other table and highlight that entire array, comma. I want this time the 4th, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. I want the 4th column this time, and I still want an exact match. So I'm typing false and parentheses, return or enter. And here is my value here. Okay, I'm going to drag this down. Resize the column. And now we've got the sales price information. If we remember, what I was looking for is what are those total sales of the Mavic 2. So now I've got the information. I can probably find this. There's a number of different ways I could do this. What I'm going to do is create a pivot table. That's what it asks you to do to get practice again. So I'm going to highlight the entire table here. So again, you can hold down Command Shift or Control Shift if you're on a PC, down, over. Again, your cubicle training videos will teach you all this, but once I've got that highlighted, I'm going to go over to Insert and Pivot Table. And it tells you to do a new worksheet. Sometimes, honestly, I just like to do existing worksheet. So I am going to place this right here and push OK. And now what I'm going to do is bring in the description because I want to look for Mavic 2 and I want sales price because that's what they asked for, right? Yeah, the total sales of Mavic 2. So I'm going to say total sales of Mavic 2 here. I'm going to highlight these to make it more obvious that it's dollar values here. I can also change this if I want to. So instead of row labels, I might put like product description or SKU description. Maybe SKU description is better. Type SKU description. Okay. Now that I've got that, I can see Mavic 2 here. So they were asking what is the total sales of Mavic 2 here. It's 23,985. But if I want, I can also share this information outside of just looking at a table with numbers. And if I go to Pivot Table Analyze here and then click on Pivot Chart here, as long as I'm within the pivot table, it's automatically going to pull a chart for me. So I'm just going to keep this in the same area here, make this a little bit bigger, and maybe make this a little bit more descriptive instead of total. I'm going to say total sales price or sales by product, or we'll say SKU description. And that's the table we're looking at. So this shows us how we can use relational databases to link two tables together using a simple but powerful Excel formula called VLOOKUP. So I'm going to stop sharing, and that ends this video.